Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to Meridian International Center. My name is Stuart Holliday. I'm the president here, and we'd like to say that we're very delighted that Admiral Blumenthal has conceived of and helped us develop as part of our global health initiative this roundtable today on global cooperation on combating the pandemic and dealing with the H1N1 issue, which of course is one that is very much top of mind, not only domestically but internationally. We'd like to welcome our friends not only from NIH and the European Commission, of course, academia. Meridian International Center exists to try to provide a platform for exchange between leaders from the United States and other countries. And as part of this effort, we have nearly 3,000 leaders a year from around the world coming to the United States to work with their counterparts. Today's roundtable is actually an innovative step for us in that we will be using this content particularly to communicate with audiences not only throughout the United States but overseas, and we'll be working with a variety of media outlets to try to make sure that this conversation gets the appropriate attention it deserves. So again, I thank you all for being here. I think we're going to be joined by a number of other guests as well. I'd like to thank particularly Genentech for supporting this discussion as well, and for all of you all who are here today. And I know we're going to be in for an interesting discussion this afternoon. Susan?
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Holliday, and welcome to everyone who's here today. Imagine that there was a global blizzard that went around the world several times, causing illness and disrupting the infrastructure, trade, and travel. That's what we have in a flu pandemic. And to talk about it, its implications, what's caused it, some of the historical lessons that we've learned, who's at risk, what we need to do to treat it, and importantly, how to foster global partnerships and cooperation to effectively respond. We have a very distinguished panel of people from government, from the research community, and from business. And we want to thank all of you here today for participating with us. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Mr. Merkel.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. This is actually my first time I've spoken anywhere in America. I've just come to the U.S. To the EU delegation, the European Commission delegation in Washington, where I'm responsible for health, food, and consumer issues. And before that, and I'm talking only weeks here, I was the head of health strategy and health systems in the European Commission back in Brussels. And so I was, of course, inevitably involved in certain aspects of H1N1, particularly in relation to the impact on health systems and how we could handle that.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Heilman, and I'm the director of the Division of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, and that's within the NIH, and my job is all the pathogens except AIDS. So of the 293 pathogens that I have responsibility for right now, our number one is H1N1. And so we're involved in both supporting research, but more importantly, I think for the crowd that's here today, we're involved in the development of vaccines and new antivirals, and hopefully with some of the implementation and policy decisions around that. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll move it over to Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Mike Osterholm. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota in the School of Public Health and the School of Medicine. I direct the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy there at the university. I also am the director of the Minnesota Center of Excellence for Influenza Research and Surveillance, which is one of the NIH 5 centers of excellence on influenza. I have been involved with public health for far more years than I would care to talk about, having been at the Minnesota Department of Health for 25 years, most of those as a state epidemiologist, having been in the field of infectious disease at the grassroots level. Our group at the University of Minnesota has been particularly involved with preparing for the next pandemic for almost a decade. We've written extensively, actually, about the public health, medicine, and business connection to pandemic influenza on a global basis in the just-in-time economy and have continued to work in this area extensively.
Well, thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. I'm Susan Blumenthal. I served as Assistant Surgeon General of the United States and am the chair of Meridian's Global Health Program. It's a new program that will bring together scientists, academia, and diplomats to talk about some of the pressing public health problems of our time. And we're here today to talk about H1N1 influenza. Dr. Hellman, can you tell us a little bit about how this new virus emerged? I mean, in 1968, the Surgeon General of the United States said it's time to close the book on infectious diseases. Well, since he made that prediction, one new disease has emerged every single year. Diseases like AIDS and Ebola and now H1N1. How did it emerge? What is it? And what should be our response?
Excellent question. By the way, we're still trying to find that quote from the Surgeon General. We're not actually sure he said it, but it had an impact on a lot of people with respect to a beginning to not have as much concern about infectious diseases. And as you had said, Susan, this clearly has changed. Where did this come from? Well, I think I'm going to give you a little bit of a basic 101 on influenza viruses. Influenza viruses are a mixture of viruses, and their main goal is to survive. And there's even a major goal may be to dominate. So there's a number of influenza viruses that are all over the place, and they mix and they change and they mutate. And every once in a while, you'll find a dominant strain that comes up. And that's usually what happens in our seasonal influenza. We tend to predict which one of the many, many influenza viruses that are out there are going to be dominant. The interesting part about this one was that actually the story goes that we were testing a new diagnostic to see if we could get better information quicker. And we found a strain that we had never seen before. And it wasn't something that was easily identifiable. And when people began to look a little bit more closely about this particular strain, the connection between what was going on in Mexico and this strain became very apparent. And people looked a little bit more closer at this strain and found that it was a mixture of segments of different kinds of influenza viruses, such that we had never seen something quite like this in the human population. And that begins to make a lot of people very concerned when you don't see something that you've ever seen in a human population before, and all of a sudden it's in a human population. And so a lot of attention began looking very carefully at this particular virus. And they found it was a mixture of sequences that came from a pig very long time ago, but its origin was in a pig. And it had mutated and it had changed in such a way that it was quite comfortable actually infecting humans. And so this is the problem that began where we are right now, is that knowledge that we got.